Okay, so a lot of the questions that I asked you last lesson were about the branding of One Direction. And what I want us to do is to think about how did we discuss branding when we were looking at advertising? Think about the Galaxy brand, think about the NHS brand, the Omo brand. Galaxy was about opulence, luxury, class, style. NHS was about activism, aspiration, relatability, and strength. And then Omo was about domesticity and femininity. So that's what we mean by branding. What are those values? What are those things that are intrinsically linked to that product? Now, in this case, the product is the band. And I do use that word product deliberately because although they are real people, although this is, their real lives, One Direction is not who they are. That's the brand. The individual boys are people of their own, but the brand is very much constructed by the music industry. And that's why the word of the lesson today, the word of the day, is contrived. The word contrived means deliberately created rather than arising naturally or spontaneously. This band did not just happen to be famous and successful. They did not just naturally become very popular. They are presented in a contrived way. Every decision that is made is done purposefully. Their image, their lyrics, their TV performances, their social media campaigns, every part of that is constructed purposefully by a team of people at Psycho, which is their record label, and for a very specific purpose, to create a brand image that the audience will find appealing. So what is this brand image? What has been contrived? I've put a list of words here, all of which I think would be good if you were writing about this as an exam to explore. So I've started with the one that might be surprising. I've started with safe and wholesome. When they first started out, they were a young band, young male teenagers. And a lot of their imagery, and we're going to look at this in their first single in a moment, was really, really wholesome, was family friendly, censored. Like I said previously, they're aiming at the mainstream, so they're not provocative, they're not controversial, they're not rebellious. They're sweet, kind, nice, good-looking chaps who are having some fun. And that was a huge part of their branding, and I think by making them family friendly, it gets the buy-in from parents, because when you've got a teen target audience, you have to convince parents to spend money because teenagers don't have as much disposable income. It also links to the X Factor branding. So the X Factor is a family show. So the band that came from the X Factor also sort of family friendly, wholesome, mainstream, nothing too controversial. The other words I put there, youthful, excitable, upbeat, again, this kind of very young, silly, fun-loving image was created. They're kind of a little bit jokey, a little bit silly, very real, very relatable, again, to their young audience. And then we've got, as I just said, relatable, identifiable, journey and quality. So a lot of their branding at the beginning revolved around their kind of, as I said before, rags to riches story, the fact that they were normal working class boys with some talent, and they came together to be this success. And because the audience watched them and voted for them on the X Factor, they immediately felt connected to that journey. They felt like they kind of owned part of that success, and they were part of the whole thing. So they kind of identified with it as it went through. So that was a big part of their branding. And then as time went on, and again, we're going to look at this in a minute, they started to become more aspirational. Oddly, almost kind of distancing themselves a little bit more from their audience to become more heroic, more status symbols. Previously, it had all been about their connection with their audience and the fact that they were the same and they were silly and fun. And then as time went on, they started to become more heroic, more aspirational, more sort of high status, people to look up to rather than to be like. So that was what they wanted to do. And then we're going to look at how they did that in a moment. So just to kind of summarise here, they wanted to be presented as innocent. There was a kind of safe sexualisation. So they were heartthrobs right from the beginning. They're good-looking boys, and they were presented in a way which was designed to emphasise how handsome they were for their teen audience. to create these crushes, because that's the kind of thing that creates this crazed fandom. But none of that was overly sexualized to really focus them on that young audience. And then as they went through, as they sort of developed their brand image, they did that by thinking about what each individual member could offer. So I asked you this question last lesson, and some of you said, well, there's sort of this something for everyone. They thought about the ethnicities in the band, or, you know, the fact that Niall is Irish. There's a blonde one, there's a brunette one, there's a curly haired one, there's a mixed race one, etc. It's quite heavy handed in terms of representation, but there's certainly that sense that each one had a different personality and style, which was contrived, so that there would be that mass appeal, something, an individual for each part of the audience to enjoy. So that's the preferred reading. Remember Stuart Hall's reception theory? We've got a little thumbs up here, a little thumbs down. Preferred reading is this. They're young, excitable, relatable, nice, safe, wholesome, friendly boys. Now, there's obviously always an oppositional reading as well. One Direction are hugely successful, it has to be said, we cannot deny it. But there are lots of people who hate One Direction, and they're one of our CSPs that actually divide audiences the most. They create the most Marmite responses, love or hate. And I think that's a bit of a backlash against the contrived nature of them as a band. It's known that the X Factor quite literally constructs musical artists. This is not an organic way of getting famous. This is, I've gone on a talent show, I want to be famous. So it fast tracks you, and it creates this whole stigma around you being a bit more fake, a bit more manufactured. So created in a lab, created in a factory, rather than just organically talented. So there's a lot of hate related to this idea of being fake, talentless, just out for the fame, haven't had to work that hard. So that's probably why they emphasize their journey so much, to try and counteract this idea they haven't had to work very hard to get famous. So yeah, the oppositional reading links to the being contrived. They're too fake, they're too manufactured, they haven't worked for what they've got. And that's something that you could maybe weigh up and analyse in an exam answer.